The Arctic, useful for shipping lanes and polar bears, but also a potential threat from America's rivals. Welcome to America Uncovered, I'm Chris Chappell. The U.S. is concerned about the Arctic. Is it because of the shrinking polar bear habitat? Or the secret Nazi bases? Or Santa's so-called workshop, where he forces thousands of little people to work around the clock making toys for export? No, it's because of Russia and China. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was in Finland last week for a meeting of the Arctic Council. Basically picture 2 days of PowerPoint presentations followed by awkward family photos with top officials from Arctic nations. That's not a joke. Those group photos of officials are actually called family photos. But frankly, they won't get truly awkward until someone's holding a parrot. Okay, the parrot is not the weirdest part of this photo. Moving on. Why was Pompeo at the Arctic Council? The U.S. is one of 8 countries that borders the Arctic Circle. No, seriously, it is. Remember Alaska? This map is from the Arctic Institute. The North Pole is in the middle. The map shows several important shipping routes from the Pacific Ocean at the top to and from Europe and the Atlantic Ocean at the bottom. These shipping routes all pass through the Bering Strait between Alaska and Russia. You can even see them from Sarah Palin's house. What? It's almost election season and I'm feeling nostalgic. Never thought I'd say it, but for U.S. politics, that was a simpler time. Anyway, back to the Arctic. These Arctic shipping routes weren't used much in the 20th century. There was too much ice, so it was hard to move ships through. But good news, the ice caps are melting, and that's opened up a lot of new shipping lanes. The flip side is that also opens up security concerns, like, certain countries might pose a military threat to everyone else in the region. It turns out Russia is doing in the Arctic Ocean what China is doing in the South China Sea, using it for military drills and demanding that other countries recognize its territorial claims.
In the Northern Sea route, Moscow already illegally demands other nations request permission to pass, requires Russian maritime pilots to be aboard foreign ships, and threatens to use military force to sink any that fail to comply with their demands.
Now, to be fair, Canada also has disagreements with the U.S. over shipping routes. But the difference is Canada doesn't threaten to use military force to sink U.S. ships. Instead, they've threatened to pour gallons of maple syrup into the Arctic Ocean, immobilizing U.S. ships and giving our sailors diabetes. Truly diabolical. As for the other countries in the region, Denmark, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, and Finland, they're all pretty chill. Get it? Because they're cold. Chill. No? In my defense, Matt wrote that joke. Anyway, there is a forum for resolving Arctic disputes peacefully with all these countries, the Arctic Council. It's the one with the boring meetings. The problem is Russia. Unlike the other countries in the region, Russia is not a democracy. Well, it is technically a democracy, but, if you don't vote for Putin, let's just say you'll regret it. And since Russia is an aggressive, authoritarian regime, when it starts doing military drills to prepare for war in the Arctic, its neighbors get a bit concerned. But don't worry too much about Russia. Save some of that worry for China. Now you might be wondering, China is here, but the Arctic Circle doesn't begin until all the way up here. But that hasn't stopped China from declaring itself a near-Arctic state, even though it's more than 900 miles from the Arctic Circle. That's like saying Florida is a near New York state. So close and yet so far. But in any case, the Chinese regime wants to establish a so-called Polar Silk Road to ship goods through the Arctic Ocean. Basically, the Chinese Communist Party wants the right to use and potentially control key shipping routes. Because how else is the world going to get their giant crates of Robert Kops delivered on time? Besides shipping them across the Pacific through the Panama Canal, or through the South China Sea through the Suez Canal, or around the Cape of Good Hope, or the vast network of train tracks China built across Asia and Europe. Other than those, China has no choice but to go through the Arctic. Okay, to be fair, cutting through the Arctic would shave thousands of miles off shipping to parts of the world. And that could lead to more of those low prices we've come to expect from China. But does that give Chinese authorities a right to establish China as a near-Arctic state? According to Mike Pompeo, those claims are kinda stupid.
Beijing claims to be a near Arctic state, yet the shortest distance between China and the Arctic is 900 miles. There are only Arctic states and non-Arctic states. No third category exists, and claiming otherwise entitles China to exactly nothing.
But when has not being entitled to a territory ever stopped the Chinese Communist Party from making claims? Just think Tibet, Taiwan, the South China Sea, and the moon. Last year, China launched the Snow Dragon 2. It's a research vessel in the Arctic. But the Chinese regime could use its civilian research presence to pave way for military presence. Like, what if the Snow Dragon, while doing some research, just so happens to detect U.S. military activities with its advanced radar system? The Chinese Communist Party has recently announced a policy of so-called military-civil fusion, which essentially means they can commandeer any private Chinese technology for military use. So in addition to the presence of the Russian military, we also have to worry about the Chinese military and Santa's angry elf defectors. That's why the US is working on a new Arctic defense strategy. That hasn't been published yet, but the Coast Guard has already submitted their own strategy, and it involves upgrading the US's ships, planes, and monitoring stations to project sovereignty into the region. Because if the US doesn't project sovereignty, Russia and China will. What? Are you going to wait for Canada to do it? What's that, Shelley? Canada does claim full sovereignty over the Northwest Passage, putting it at odds with the US and Europe? Oh no, we should have been worried about Canada all along. So what do you think? Leave your comments below. But first, it's time for me to answer a question from one of our supporters on the crowdfunding website Patreon. Jay Joyce asks, you recently did a video about the student loan crisis. However, you didn't address why tuition grows astronomically year after year. If oil companies did this, Congress would be holding hearings. Why is no one investigating the colleges as to why they raise tuition so much? Good question, Jay. The reason tuition has gone up so much in the last several decades are complex. That's why I didn't go into them. I mean, that episode was already 11 minutes long. So was my other video about whether college should be free. The simple answer is there's vastly more tuition money available these days because it's so easy to take out massive student loans. And when money comes so easily to students, colleges can easily raise tuition without students rejecting the college. But that's just market forces, distorted by easy access to credit. As far as I can tell, colleges haven't done anything illegal, so there's nothing really for Congress to investigate. Congressional hearings are just not that fun when no one is hiding anything. Thanks for your question, Jay. And thank you for your Patreon support. Visit patreon.com/AmericaUncovered. Support America Uncovered by pledging $1 or more per episode. Your contributions allow us to pay for staff and equipment so we can keep making this show. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching America Uncovered.